All right. So you were a part of two founding sales teams. In both cases, these teams were acquired. So you've had those two exits. About how old were you when that took place?
I was part of three founding sales
Three.
teams, two
Magic
of
number.
two of which became acquired. I was in my mid to late 20s.
Okay. So by this time, you had co-founded, built, sold your first company. You were, as we mentioned, first sales hires and going through that growth trajectory of with three different companies. You sold goat cheese door to door to retail stores for your half sister's company who owned the company. And so by this time you had also learned five languages. Is that
I speak five languages, yes.
five languages? So, Carol, you are one of the most ambitious and driven people I know. But where's that all come from? Where does all that come from?
I'm glad it comes across that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, I
it
speak
doesn't
one
always feel
language
that way.
and I'm still figuring that one out. So I don't know how you do five.
I think sort of my career trajectory has been a big happy accident.
Mm,
I did not grow up thinking I want to be a salesperson, and I don't think most people do. I think they kind of fall into it, and then if they become good at it, they really like it.
right.
But that's not what I went to school for. That's not what I was planning on doing.
Yeah, you went to school for
And then
literature, French and was it yeah, French and Italian language and literature.
yes,
Wow.
which was also sort of an accident because I was studying music as a child and as a teenager. Um, so when I graduated college, my older sister asked me to go work for her and sell goat cheese, and it's not like I had anything else planned. So I said, sure, why not? And I started doing it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I loved speaking to customers. I was excited about the product. I liked the interactions. I liked the opening new markets part of it. I loved the whole thing. And I sort of, jumped into it and trying to learn as much as I could. And it was my first job and also my first sales job.
Hmm.
And
But
that's
where does the drive come from, though? I mean, to come to the United States at a young age, go into college. I'm sure you had language capability already that you brought with you, but to learn more languages in that process and through school and then exit that and go into sales. And I mean, you weren't even 30 yet and you had done so much. And I'm just trying to really understand where that drive comes from. Is it how you were raised? Is it what your parents did for a living? Where did the ambition, the drive come from? You're hardworking, and you talk about that in other interviews, but how hard you work and in shaping your career. But I mean, be honest with us. Where does that drive come from?
It's not that I'm not willing to share. I just think you'll be underwhelmed by the
It's
answers.
okay.
So, I definitely came from a privileged background. Both my parents were in academia. My father was in politics in the States and in Greece for part of his career.
Interesting.
And they both worked very hard. But what happened is, my parents had me later in life. I was a happy accident, and my other siblings were overachievers, very good in
Mm-mm.
school, very good in sports, and I wasn't. I was a very mediocre, if not bad student. And my parents didn't spend a lot of time with me in that regard because, again, they were older and they already had two children that were doing a lot of things. So maybe they thought that I would naturally sort of follow that trajectory, and I didn't. So my father passed when I was 16.
Oh, sorry.
He got sick and passed in a very short time span. And because he had spent a lot of time in the States and both my sisters were in the States, it was sort of the plan for me to also come here. But up to the point where I moved here when I was 17 to go to college, I really had no plan, structure. I mean, nothing. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't getting into trouble, but I definitely wasn't school oriented or, again, structured, I think, is the main theme.
Hmm.
So when I came over, I moved by myself. I didn't know anyone. And for my first couple of years in college, I was failing miserably. I mean, again, I did not have that background of studying or coming back to structure, creating a regime for myself, or
Right.
really knowing how to operate in a class environment. And sort of my turning point, I think, was I really wanted to study abroad. And I remember one of my professors telling me, if you really don't turn this around, not only will the department not let you go study abroad, you won't even get a job, a degree that's good enough for you to get a job at Starbucks. And I was like, oh shit.
Wake
Uh,
up.
yeah, and again, I didn't know. Like, I didn't have to work as a kid. I didn't have to work as a teenager. My parents sort of provided for me. So I sort of thought that things would, turn out fine because they always had. And that's when I really sort of turned it around and started, forced myself to study, spent a lot of time at the library, got a few tutors, and just had to get decent enough grades to graduate with a decent enough score to be able to then get a job. And
Right.
after graduation, I moved back to Greece and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And my sister called me and said, listen, I need someone to come sell for me in New York. Do you want to move here? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I moved here and I was working remote because the company was based out of Alabama.
Hmm.
So I kind of had to figure a lot of things out on my own. New York was a new city, but I,
Interesting.
I jumped into it because I really didn't have another option. And I really loved selling.
Before that, another podcast you mentioned ag tourism, I think is when you
Agritourism. Yeah,
that's
that's
what
what
you
I
were
was
going to do
gonna go
before you
do.
came back to the States,
I was
right?
gonna go live in Italy on a farm and
Wow. That'd be awesome.
just yeah, but it's not a real
I
life.
mean, the picture, the Tuscany hills, and
That's
this
what
is
I
what
was
comes to mind.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow, that would have
Yes.
been amazing. So, did you have a chance to do that, or that's what you were going
I
to
did
do?
not. I moved to New
Okay,
York.
cool. Okay. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I think understanding someone's journey, whether it's underwhelming or overwhelming, either way, it's always good to. There's always lessons that we can take from that. I mean, you went through a lot of change and you overcame some adversity, whether it be of your own just haphazard approach towards things, and finally getting a fire lit under you to make it happen. But definitely looks like perseverance, hard work, focus. These are things that you've talked about in other interviews. And so about that, let's go to your sales career a little bit.
Sure.
There was a point in time where, and you share the story a couple times in other interviews where I don't know which position it was. I think it was an inside sales role. You're struggling a little bit in the beginning. And so you were staying in the office until 10, 11 o'clock at night, having your managers stay there with you and just really trying to perfect the pitch and understand the business and be effective and be your best. And I think in a short window of time, you did really well because of that, right?
Yes.
So the burnout police are probably going to get me or get us for this one, but do
Mm.
you think that's the level of commitment it takes today for people to be successful, or the top people to be successful in sales? And is that what you see top founders and top salespeople doing, that level of work ethic, or is it, or do you not see it as often?
Yes and no, and I'll tell you what I mean. So, I'm from a different generation. I'm not ancient, but I'm not, Gen Z. And I think there was a different mentality towards working hard, playing hard, doing whatever it takes, which to your point right now, we talk a lot about burnout, which is real.
Yeah.
People do not want to put that sort of effort in, or there's more of a separation between work and life. I did not have that separation mentally or practically when I started to sell because I didn't really have an option. That
Hmm.
the what you're referring to was my first cold calling job and my first startup. I had done sales before for my sister and for myself, but they were always outside door-to-door sales versus cold calling. So that was
Hmm.
a new animal for me.
Right.
And I was doing very bad. So in order to do well and keep that job, I had the mentality of, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. So I was shadowing top reps. I was practicing the script with my boyfriend at the time. I would practice in front of a mirror. I stayed in the office late. I forced my managers to stay late with me. I listened to my own calls. Like, I was doing whatever I knew that I should do to put myself in the best position to win. And you'll see that um there's a sort of like a pushback from newer sales reps to do that. And I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do,
Right.
but what I know from my experience is that the life in a startup of a sales rep is very different than the life in a big corporate Salesforce type of environment. If you're part of a startup where the main theme is growth and scaling and doing that in a very short period of time, you have to do whatever it takes if you want to succeed. And if that's not what you want to do, that's okay, but maybe that's not the right environment for you. And I think something to really sort of note there is that you don't have to do this type of work and put in these many hours forever. But in the beginning, until you learn, until you get the basics down, until you get to a point where you feel, I got this,
Right.
you need to put in that effort.
Right. Right. John Burroughs talks about getting to that point of unconscious competence, right? Where you don't need the tactics and the structure so much. It's innate, really, at that point. It's a level of virtuosity, if you will. But yeah, I agree 110%. I think it's the same as in any career, really. That level of focus and hard work and concentration has to go in, and to get to be, if you want to be the best, if you want to not just kind of get by, but if you want to be the best, particularly, I think there's that level. And there's seasons to it. You don't always have to be grinding it out. It comes and goes.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you kind of pushed your way into being a consultant at one point. So this is the sales consultant podcast. And so I want to understand the consultant journey for a little bit. Now, there was a point in time where you kind of pushed your way into it. And I think you were even willing to not take any money to learn, go into an internship and, really, is it because you wanted to learn how to be an effective sales consultant? And what was driving you to be in that space? Why did you want to be a consultant so bad?
I'll tell you what exactly happened.
Okay.
So I was part of different early stage startups as a very early employee. And at some point during that sales career, I was introduced by my CEO to a company that needed consulting. So I had done that a little bit, but only for a period of about 3 months. There was an Israeli company that was looking to come in the States, and I helped them build out the go-to-market strategy. But I hadn't really done consulting before on a serious full-time basis. And the company I was working for got hit really bad from COVID because we were selling to the restaurant industry. So when that happened, I was thinking, okay, we're changing our model in order to be able to survive. I don't know how excited I am about this new offering that we have. What's next for me? Do I look for another startup? So what I do in times of uncertainty, I have a network of mentors that I'll reach out and I'll say, hey, I'm thinking of X. What's your experience on this, or what's your take on this? And a few different people that have known me for years suggested consulting.
Got it.
And I was like, that's interesting. And someone suggested Ramped, which was the company I used to work for.
Right.
And I had known Darren, the CEO from Main Street Hub, my first company. I knew he was competent when it came to sales. And I reached out and I said, hey, I have a full-time job. Not sure how long I'm going to be there for. I'm interested in learning. How do you feel about bringing me on? And we had 2 or 3 discussions, and eventually, he was open to it. And I did go on initially as an intern.
Interesting.
And I did that for about 8 months while I had my full-time job. And at that point, I was burnt out.
Right.
Like, I was not able to keep doing both. And I loved consulting. I really did enjoy it.
But why? What is it about the
Because
role
it
of a
was
consultant?
new, and I like a challenge.
Mm.
If you notice, I've never stayed at a startup for more than 2.5 years, and that's a long time for me,
Right.
because I feel that if I'm not learning something new, and if I'm not making more money as I'm learning something new and applying it, I've reached a ceiling. This is not where I want to be anymore.
Interesting.
So it was something new, it was challenging. I got to learn from Darren, and I got to apply everything I knew from 10 years of selling at that point,
Right.
and teach founders how to sell. And I was like, this is the best. How did I not know about this before? This is what I want to do.
Wow.
And I was not physically able to do both jobs anymore. I was exhausted. So I basically sold Darren on bringing me on, because he had his hesitations on whether he'd be able to afford to bring someone on full time, and what that, payment structure would look like.
Right. Right.
So we figured the structure out that worked at the time.
Interesting.
And yeah, I said goodbye to the startup, and I became a consultant full time exactly 2 years ago at this point.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll celebrate an anniversary then.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks.
It's an interesting story though, you kind of stumbled into it like you did with sales a little bit, or people
Yeah.
were recommending you get
Yeah.
into consulting, and
Mhm.
someone they knew of you, and they needed some help, and you dabbled for a few months, and 2 + 2 = 4, and here you are 2 years later. And particularly the internship and going in and doing that for 8 months parallel to a full-time job. I mean, that sounds exhausting for sure, but it sounds like you learned a ton in the process, and it helped shape kind of where you are now and what your direction looks like from here. I'm
But
curious
I
though.
think,
Go
Derek, if
ahead.
you
I'm
don't
sorry.
mind me jumping in, I think you need to do this. I mean, I was talking to someone last week that, has a full-time job. They don't really love their job. They want to go do something else. They're not sure if they're going to be
Right.
good at this something else. And I was like, well, why don't you try it? Why don't you keep the security of your full-time job so you can pay your rent and afford your groceries, and maybe kind of see, do I have 10 hours left in the week or 5 hours left in the week? And maybe I can make a list of the 100 best companies I'm interested in this other field,
Mm.
and say, hey, I have a job, but I really want to learn. Can I come on and, I don't know, clean the floors for you,
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, literally, that's where my head
There,
was at with it.
and,
Yeah.
and I want to learn.
Yeah. An
And this
apprenticeship.
person's like, well, yeah, I'm not sure. Well, you need to take those risks, and you
Mm.
need to put in that work if you're willing to get to where you want to be.
Right.
I know story is easy, and I think that if things were super easy, they wouldn't be as rewarding.
Well, and it's not free forever. I mean, that's the whole point, is it's
Correct.
an investment, right?
Yes.
Clients often, I'm sorry, consultants often will work for practically free in the beginning just to get the cycles, right? And get those reps
Yes.
down, and
Yes.
get the recommendations, maybe get some referrals, and kind of kickstart that process. But yeah, absolutely. And it's like you were saying before, you don't have to grind it out forever. You also don't have to work for free forever, but there's a period of time of learning the game and understanding, because consulting is not the same as leading a team. There
No.
are, just like when you were a salesperson and you went to become a manager, there was a whole host of dynamics that you were new to. So getting into the consulting game from leading, there's a whole host of dynamics that come up. But yeah, I mean, that's a great advice. I agree 110%. Often people are stepping out to be a consultant, and they're doing it as a solopreneur, and they're doing it for the first time on their own. I did that the first time I was a consultant. I did it. I had to kind of figure it out as I went, and it was the similar thing where I was kind of called upon, and it morphed into its own thing. But then working for someone else and working in a consultancy, there's different dynamics there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you find clients typically as a consultant? I know you have a large network and you're highly recommended. I see all of your recommendations on LinkedIn. So I imagine there's the network effect where people are talking about you and mentioning you. So it's kind of already happened. You've demonstrated that. But are there other ways for those that are new to consulting or making that transition, they're trying to build their funnel? What are some other approaches that you might have used to find clients in the past?
I have a network now. I
Mm.
did not 2 years ago. Nobody knew me. And in fact, I still joke and I say nobody knows me, right? I'm still very sort of new to this. Um, Cold outreach. I mean, when I started at Ramped, Darren had a lot of referrals come in because he was already doing that for about 3 years at the time, and he was starting to build his brand. Nobody knew me in this space, so it was cold outreach on LinkedIn, cold outreach over email. I remember I used to research accounts and make these personalized videos over Loom and just send them to people and say, hey, I'm Carol, this is what I'm doing, this is why you should work with me. Partnering with different early stage VCs. And after 2 years of working at Ramp full time, plus my 8 months at the internship, I now have a network of people I respect and are great in what they do, and hopefully they respect me and we help each other out. But I'm still, as I'm going to be launching my business, I will be doing cold outreach. It's the same in sales. You can't rest on your laurels. You always need to reach out to people.
It sounds like you're sipping on your own champagne, drinking your own beer, all those things, right? We're going to talk about cold calling and LinkedIn outreach here in a moment. But before we do, when you look at your practice and working with consultants, I've asked this before with other professional trainers and coaches. What blocks typically a client from getting the full value from your engagement? When you think about founder-led sales, pre-seed, and where you specialize in your wheelhouse, and you're in those engagements for whatever period of time, what typically blocks the client from getting the full value from what you offer in those engagements?
You mean before they start? Like what blocks
No,
them from
after, like
buying?
when you're
Oh,
walking through the process, maybe you're, working through the playbook, you're working through product market fit, ideal customer profile analysis, right? When you're going through these stages that you work through with your clients, not every engagement is perfect. Let's be
sure.
honest, right? Like there's parts of the engagement that go really well, and there's parts of the engagement sometimes that don't go so well.
Sure.
So how do customers get in their own way? How do clients get in their own way from blocking the value that you bring to the engagement? I mean, that's a
I
better
mean,
way of asking it.
people get in their own way all the time. It doesn't just have to be founders doing sales. It could be salespeople, or think of yourself, right? Let's say you want to work out and you have this big goal, and you go to the gym, and the trainer says, "I want you to do X, Y, and Z Monday, Wednesday, Friday," and then a month goes by and you haven't done anything. You can't blame the trainer for you not getting into shape. So when you work as a consultant or a sales coach, or a trainer, there's this back and forth. There's this relationship where you take your expertise and you take everything that you know and you communicate it in different ways to the client, but you're not responsible for the execution. So there needs to be a clear understanding from the get-go that this is what I'm responsible for, this is what I'm going to deliver to you, this is what I need you to do. Otherwise, the playbooks and the ICP analysis is not worth anything. It's just a piece of paper. They need to execute and they need to report back, and there's constant iteration, and there needs to be a communication loop in place, and there need to be clear guidelines for both parties of this is what I'm delivering to you, this is what I need you to deliver to me. And I think that, I've heard this from other consultants. Oh, I hate this client. Well, did you tell them what they need to do? No, I kind of figured they'd do it. I mean, you need to
The hand
act
holding.
as that guide, and you need the hand holding because someone may be a brilliant Ivy League engineer that has built a bunch of companies, but selling isn't their strong suit. So you need to realize that you will treat them as a junior salesperson because they don't know, and you're responsible to teach them.
Yeah. It sounds like it's kind of the opposite of some of those things you mentioned, where it's not, if you don't have the feedback loop, the communication loop, then that's probably what gets in the way, and those sorts of things, right? So I think there's a level of cooperation, sounds like, in the engagement that you're looking for on both sides. Like we have to be open to be able to speak plainly to our clients about what we're seeing in the business as well. And sometimes that's not always met with, happy ears, right? I mean, but that's the reality of our role at times, is,
But
pointing out that. Go
you
ahead.
should try, and you're not always going to be successful at this, but
Hmm.
you should try to create those expectations before you bring the client on. You need to be very clear on what you're going to deliver during the engagement and what the results are going to be at the end of this engagement. And you need to be clear with them on the time commitment and the actions that you expect on their end. Otherwise, if and things may still take a
Yeah,
left turn.
exactly.
They do
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. But you need to make sure you set those ground rules before you begin.
Fair enough. Now, in that stage of founder-led sales, you've talked a lot about how often founders will maybe look at sales as sort of an afterthought. And it's, we're building a product, we're taking something from concept to reality. And yeah, I think at times and I think you've also said this, is the notion of, if I build it, they will come.
Yes.
Is that effectively still what you're, so what's, I mean, why is that? And it's, the product's not going to sell itself, we know that, but and there's different motions, there's product-led motions that will effectively sell itself, but if you're not in that situation where you need to have the founder, and where's their hesitation to do the selling? I imagine they're leaning heavy on their board for referrals, they're probably leaning heavy on their network, kind of like you do as a consultant, and maximizing those channels. But is that what they kind of rest on, those laurels? Is that what it is? And why they think I'll use other channels, I don't need to be out there front and center? Why do founders hesitate to put themselves out there, do you find?
There's a couple of different reasons. Number one is they just don't know better. This is
Mm,
not their area of expertise. To me and you, because we are salespeople, it's
right.
obvious. To them, it's not. Similarly, if I tried to code, I mean, I don't know how to do it. It's not what I've done. Someone would need to teach me the ABCs. So that's part one. Part
But if you were
two,
building a coding product, though, if you did know how to code and you were building a product around that, I mean, it would be natural extension for, even if you weren't a salesperson, to be talking about it. I mean, and if you look at rounds of getting finance, right? You're out there talking to the investors.
yeah, but people suck at raising money.
Mm-hmm.
People suck at selling. It's not an environment where they've been in before. If it's not a skill that comes naturally, it's hard to figure out what they need to do, even if to someone like you and me, because we do interact with people.
Right.
It's like, duh, of course I need to do this. So I think that's one of it. I think another is sales gets a pretty bad rap. You think of a
Mm.
salesperson, you think of the used car salesperson, right? Nobody wants to talk to that person. So I've heard it a lot of times from founders, and I've been equally shocked every time that, I don't want to talk to customers because I don't want to come across as pushy. They think it's the only way to sell. Sales for them is this nasty, pushy, in your face type of thing, versus I'm just trying to uncover pain points. I'm just curious to see if my product can help. So I think it's a reputation that comes with sales. I think, as we said, it's the fact that we don't know. It's something you just mentioned, that they feel that because they may get introductions from their accelerator, founder network, VC, that's enough to get the motion going, or simply they may believe that the product will sell itself, which which rarely happens. Or they believe that I can just pay a VP that has a strong track record to come in and figure this out for me, which also doesn't work. The founder needs to sell first. And
Well,
if
that's
the
key
founder
right there,
can't
what you just
sell,
said. That's huge, right?
but again, they don't know that. They
Mm-hmm.
think, I'm good at the engineering, the product part. I don't need to be good at the sales part. Therefore, I'll outsource it early, so I don't have to deal with it. But if the founder can't sell a product, no one can sell a product, because no one will ever be as passionate or knowledgeable about the product and the problem as the founders are. And that's why I always tell founders, fall in love with the problem, worry about the solution later. Because if you've experienced the problem, and if there's a ton of other people that also experience the problem and can talk to you about it, you'll get so good at being able to talk about how big and urgent that pain is, that will help you sell it.
Wow. So if I had founded a company and I checked the boxes in terms of founder-led sales, right? I went out there, did roll my sleeves up literally, and did the work and was able to shape this a little bit, right? Kind of get it off of its knees onto its feet. And so it's walking a little bit, the infancy stage. And meaning I have a little bit of an understanding of who the persona is. I've been able to validate that a bit, maybe been able to validate the product market fit and the messaging and these things a little bit. Now I'm ready to bring that VP in because have the makings of a playbook that they can now continue to build on and accelerate,
Yeah.
not replace that effort for me. So got that. What are those top things that we need to do that effectively? I know you've talked about hiring process and when and how to scale, but if I've checked all the boxes and I'm ready to go to hire my first VP of sales, build out a sales organization, what are the top things I need to be mindful of in that transition? Because I'd imagine that's not necessarily, that's another thing that's hard to crack as well, is taking all those learnings from the founder and what they did and what worked for them, and now trying to duplicate that with the sales organization.
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's a lot to uncover here. So one thing I would say to start is that even if you've sold as a founder successfully to your first handful of customers and you have a basic process down that kind of works, I wouldn't hire a VP right away. I'd hire a salesperson. I'd hire an individual contributor to help me that I can then teach this process to. I think you're still too early.
Mhm.
And then you decide whether that's an SDR, BDR, or whether that's a full cycle person, depending on your product and sales cycle and how robust the process that you've built is and how much bandwidth you have, and whether you need an appointment setter where you then take over the demo, or you need someone to work with you. But it's still too early to bring on senior leadership. I mean, who are they going to lead? You
Mhm.
just need someone that
Well,
uh
to your point, they would build it as they fly. They would be out talking and selling while they're trying to
yeah,
recruit and hire.
you
Yeah.
want someone that's willing to roll up their sleeves and figure this shit out with you. Someone
That
that's going to
franchise
be
player you can build around. Mhm.
yeah, exactly. But when you decide to bring someone in, what you want to be thinking of, which is something I talk about a lot, is how do you equip that person for success? Do you have a CRM that they can use where they can see all the accounts? How are they going to call? Do you have a prospecting tool? Are you using LinkedIn or Sales
Do you have
Navigator,
any
or
lead flow tracking? I mean,
yeah,
hello.
or
Do you, are you, I mean, right.
Hollow, or whatever? What are you
Yeah.
using? What's your tech stack? Do you have a script they can follow? Do you have case studies they can read through? Do you have demos recorded that they can listen to?
Mhm.
How do you explain your mission and vision? How do you really train them in all the ins and out of the product to make sure that when they talk to a customer, they can sound almost as good as you do? And then that you can replicate that process and iterate on it as you grow and you're talking to more people and potentially you're selling to different segments. But imagine that person is coming in blind, because they are,
Mhm.
and you need to teach them everything you know. So how are you going to do that? And those are the things founders need to be thinking of.
Right. So during that founder-led sales motion, you just rattled off a checklist of things. So if you're listening to this episode, go back, listen to those things that she just mentioned. That is the guide of things you need to have checked off and ready before you hire that first BDR, that first salesperson, whatever it is that you hire based on the recommendation we're hearing from is have that stuff dialed in, that script. And I think it would be natural human behavior for a founder who's very ambitious about selling, actually, because not every founder is apprehensive to the process. Some will grab the reins and jump in there and do it. But are you documenting it? Are you recording those demos? Are you getting this packaged in a way that it's ready to hand off to someone so that they don't come in blind and they can take the reins from you, if you will, and run with it, right?
Yeah.
So, in closing, talk to us about your new venture. You're turning corners here, and you're starting something of your own. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I'm going to be launching my website in the next couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about. The name of the company is Market Pull.
Nice. And is
And
anybody heard this before? Are we hearing it first for the here for the first time?
no, you're hearing it first.
Market pool. I love it. Go ahead.
And essentially what Market Pull is a free sales content guide for early stage startups. And the reason for that is because a lot of founders I've worked with in the past have told me that, hey, I don't know when to hire, who to hire, how to figure out my different buyer personas, how to build a playbook, how to even have those initial customer conversations. And I read all these different things online and on LinkedIn that tell me, do a discovery, don't do a discovery. You should charge, you should keep it free. You should wait till you hit 1 million in ARR. You should hire after your 10 sales. They see all these different things and they don't know what to listen to.
Right.
So I wanted to create something that's tactical, easy to follow, that people can read and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I can follow this. This is what I'm going to do.
Awesome. And I think you have pretty big plans for this as well. You don't plan to stay a solopreneur with it.
Eventually, I'd love to grow this out. I have a couple of different ideas of, what I want to do. I definitely don't want to be a trainer, sales coach and just do that. But TBD.
Okay. Okay. Well, market pull, you're hearing it first here on the Sales Consultant Podcast. Carol, thank you so much. Where should people find you if they want to look you up?
LinkedIn is the best place to reach out. And of course, it's going to be marketpull.com, marketpull.com.